Coming to you live from the Ripple space in Vancouver, Washington at the Passages to Success Fall Conference, this is the Business Over Beer podcast, brought to you by Passages to Success, the best masterminding group for small businesses in all of Clark County, Washington, and beyond. Our guest on the episode is the president and COO of ZoomInfo, Chris Hayes. And now, two guys who can't stay out of your business or say no to another beer, your hosts, Ben Surratt and Jonathan Califf.
It's awesome! We're live.
Now we're finally in our element. We've got all these other speakers off the stage. Now we finally get to do something, huh?
That's right. What did we talk? A total of like 20 minutes or something?
Something like that. I don't know.
It's crazy.
Which is probably about 18 too many. Sorry, everybody. But hey, we are excited to be coming live from the Ripple space for our Passages to Success Fall Conference. We've been talking today to small business owners and to other business leaders in the community a lot about reimagining your relationship with failure and about leaning into discomfort. And we have an absolutely amazing guest joining us. We have Chris Hayes, the president and COO of ZoomInfo. ZoomInfo is a leader in modern go-to-market software, data, and intelligence for more than 30,000 companies worldwide. He's been with the company since 2016, holding a variety of positions before being promoted to president in 2021. And prior to that, Chris co-founded Inside Sales Team, growing it to more than 100 employees. Chris, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks.
I'm super happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. We are just beyond grateful that you took the time. We know it's end of quarter for ZoomInfo, so I know you're a super busy guy, everything going on. But, a modern go-to-market software, data, and intelligence company. All right, break that down. What is that?
I mean, when anybody who sells from a business-to-business perspective needs to figure out, like, what's the best fit company that they want to sell to, and then who in that company they actually want to sell to, the person. So you've got the company and then the person, and then you've got to have an idea of their intent or their fit for your product. And ZoomInfo helps answer all those questions. So whether you're selling pallets, whether you're selling, cleaning services, or whether you're selling software, everybody needs to figure out the company that needs it, the people who are going to buy into the company, and who's in the market and how to go talk to them. And ZoomInfo helps answer all those questions.
Man, amazing. Awesome. Yeah, that's incredible. And you shared with us that you've kind of always been a huge advocate for Vancouver and the Southwest Washington culture. It's been 3 years we've been talking about how great the business community, the small business community here in Southwest Washington and Vancouver is. Maybe talk a little bit about that. I mean, here you are, you're a public company, $16 billion public company, and you guys have doubled down, committing to Vancouver, going to be...
Yeah, we're going to be right over there.
Right there, right outside the window here, on the waterfront. Talk a little bit about ZoomInfo's relationship with Vancouver and why that's so special for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, we've been committed to being down here, since Henry moved the business from Ohio. We've been in downtown Vancouver. I think in 2010 we ended up in the Broadway building, which we're in now. We have the 8th, 9th, and 2nd floor in that building. If we all came back, we couldn't fit to where we are, so we bought a building. We're building it over here, and when we realized that I had outgrown that building, the conversations kicked around, do we want to go look in a suburb? Do we want to go look other places? And we all came back to saying we wanted to stay downtown. And we were super excited to have the waterfront open up for us. True story, we had put in a holding offer on that building, and it was going to expire. And the building is probably worth more than we paid for it now because we had held it on before everybody knew how special the waterfront was going to be, and it would have turned back into residential space and would have been a lot more expensive. So we had to strike that deal very, very quickly, and I'm super excited to have the space. So when I first came here, I'd been working with Henry and team for about 3 years before I joined the company, at the company that you mentioned, Inside Sales Team, as more of a consultant and outsourced. And then I ended up coming to work for Henry directly. I had never met him personally, and they flew me out to Vancouver, and I had never been here. And I landed in PDX, I came over, and they put me in the Hilton, and I remember walking around and just being blown away with how great the downtown here was. And then just got to meet everybody, and then we've been a big part of the community. I used to walk around then, and people would ask, where do you work? And I'd say Discover.org, and most people didn't know what that was at the time. We only had about 150 employees then. And now, with the growth of the company, it's a little bit more common. And then every time I came back after that, Henry put me at the Comfort Suites. So I get to stay at the Hilton one time. True story.
That's awesome. Well, Chris, we're looking forward to learning more about ZoomInfo and your experience and your expertise, particularly around business growth and scaling, and also what you're hearing from your vast customer base in the marketplace. But this is the Business Over Beer podcast.
Yes.
This is the beer portion of the program.
It's good.
We typically ask all of our guests to bring a beer, but we're going to change the script. And
It's your lucky day.
It's your
Pretty
lucky
good. I
day.
didn't bring any beer, so that's
we
good.
We brought the beer. We talked about it a little bit today with the group. Ben, what did we bring?
We brought briefcase full of hops, fresh hop, hazy IPA. Ooh, and we brewed this.
We did.
Did we brew this?
We brewed this. No joke.
all by ourselves with no help from anybody.
Yeah, Todd from Victor 23 was back there napping in the corner. He goes, "You guys got this."
Well, one thing that Vancouver does really well too, besides, having great small business owners and entrepreneurs, they have great beer.
Yes.
The best beer in the world, Kaler.
100%.
In the world.
Prove us wrong.
Yeah. Go ahead. Anyways, I'm thirsty.
We're waiting. No, nobody can prove it. There you go.
All right.
There you go. Hey, Canope, we got one for you here, buddy. Where'd you go? Oh, he's off. There you go. All right. Lindsay and Jamie, two Business Over Beer alumni. There you go. You can split it. Canope missed the boat.
All right, awesome.
Awesome.
Everybody will have a chance to taste the beer.
Again, we mentioned earlier, Victor 23 has been nice enough to provide the beer for the entire event. We have got a refrigerator filled with briefcase full of hops for everybody to try after the podcast. So
in all seriousness, Todd Britt, wave your hand, Todd. Woo! He's at Victor 23. He brewed with Victor 23.
And he got us the hookup on
And he
these
hooked
glasses,
us
right?
up.
Our brand new glasses that everybody gets to take home today too. So,
Anyways, everybody's looking at us like, you guys.
yeah, all right. Prost.
Prost.
Prost, Lacey. Prost, Jamie.
It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't bother with this
Yeah.
after during the reception. We'll just take it home. I wouldn't worry about it.
Go for the cider.
yeah, there's plenty of cider.
So, tell us about your experience just with growth. And when you moved here and you got into the business, what was it like for growth within ZoomInfo?
When I first got here, like I mentioned, I flew in and I walked around the day before, and they had at the time Discover.org on the building. I was like, oh shit, Henry has the whole building. It's amazing. And he didn't. He had 2 floors. So, a lot of the growth happens, around opportunity. And so ZoomInfo and what Henry had built with Discover.org, we're fortunate and we're blessed because the TAM that we have, the total addressable market that we have, is basically anybody who sells anything to another business, which is just about everybody, other than business to consumer. And then we have an HR application that allows us for people trying to find talent. It also helps them hire people or find people in the market. So in that respect, we've got an opportunity to sell to just about anybody. And so when you've got a TAM like that, and when you're in a space where the market's growing, which is a space that we've been in since really 2008, a growth market, you tend to lean into opportunity. And you don't want to overstretch. Like Henry was bootstrapped, so Henry didn't take money until a late stage. So we were always about profitability and not overstretching. But what you generally want to end up doing, what we did and what I've done in other places, is you set up at this point in time, I'm going to now hire more salespeople. At this point in time, I'm going to now hire more SDRs. At this point in time, I'm going to invest in brand marketing. So you have those things that you're trying to achieve, and when you achieve them, then you go and you execute. If you don't achieve them, you figure out what happened, what went wrong, why didn't I achieve it? You course correct, then you achieve it, then you go and you execute. But just having those things, this is the milestone at which point in time I'm going to go do that. And then when you're in sales, when you're selling things, a business owner, a lot of that is revenue or sales or bookings, whatever you're measuring yourselves on. That's typically what you want to measure. And then you just keep an eye on the expenses. And those milestones will help guide the way. And they also just keep you honest. So I said I wasn't going to hire the next salesperson until I got to $1 million. I'm at 850, I'm not going to do that, I'm going to stay true. And it just allows you to have those guideposts along the way. And we've been doing that, ever since I joined with Henry. And we have, as we've gotten bigger, the things and the milestones that we have gotten more sophisticated, and the measurement techniques have gotten more sophisticated, but it's still the same thing. At what point in time are we going to go invest? How much are we going to go invest, and what do we think the return's going to be? That's the same thing that I think everybody in the room, whether you've got 2 people or 20 people, those are the same decisions. Where am I going to invest, how much I'm going to invest, and what I expect to make off that investment. The core tenets.
Yeah. We talked a lot about today, throughout the conference, is failure and how to deal with failure. Starting out, any business, you deal with failure. Tell everybody how you dealt with failure, how the company dealt with failure, and yeah.
My first month with Discover.org, it was, they had just closed out May, and like I said, I'd never met Henry, and I've talked to him a lot. They didn't have a great May, so I came in and it was June, and we're in it's called Broadway conference room, and we've got 15 salespeople at the time. It wasn't that big, and Henry comes in, and Henry can be vocal. I think it's the right word for it. So he came in and he vocalized his unhappiness with the team for the month of May, and that was it was a holy shit moment for me, because I had just left a company that I'd been successful at and come to work with Henry, and the first few days that the company hadn't done that well, and Henry's coming in and expressing the dissatisfaction with that, and so. It was a temporary failure. We dug in and we figured out what had happened, and we diagnosed, like I said, the milestones. Why didn't we hit the May number? What was the root cause analysis? And you go in and you figure that out and you learn from it. And that's really the main thing about any failure. I think I've learned more from failing than I have from succeeding. Succeeding's easy, failing's hard, but you learn more from the hard things. So the way I think about it is I welcome failure. It's a learning event. The thing that I try not to do is I try not to make the same mistake twice. And if I do, I feel really bad about that, because I should have known better. I should have learned and not repeated that. But we've tried to do things in the past. We failed at them. We've gotten smarter. We've reiterated it, and we've grown. And I think, again, that's just like with every business. It's just not learning and then making the same mistake over and over again. That's when it gets really frustrating and generally doesn't set you up for success.
Yep.
Yeah, and how do you shift your mindset when that happens? Because I think we all say that I'm just going to fail once, and that's great. I'll learn from it and move on. But we oftentimes do make the same mistakes over and over again. So how have you personally kind of taken an experience like that and shifted your mindset to say, okay, enough's enough. This is what I'm actually I have to change something. I have to change my behavior, or I have to change what I'm measuring, or something. Like what's your mindset, or how do you kind of address that issue when you are making the same mistakes over and over?
The way I think about it is if you're disciplined and you understand what caused the mistake, then you probably won't make it again. And if you're making it over and over again, then you don't ultimately know what was the problem. So if you go out and you think, I'm going to go try this marketing tactic, and the marketing tactic fails, and you haven't figured out why it fails, then you're doomed to repeat that failure. So you need to go out and understand, or have a point of view about why it failed. Now, your point of view doesn't have to be wrong, but then if you go out and you make the same mistake, it's not that you're making the same mistake twice, you're trying it again, you're getting smarter. You might fail again, but you're failing for a different reason. So you might fail at something 3 times, but you're not making the same mistake. You're failing 3 times, but you're learning, and it's iterating, and now you go, okay, that wasn't the problem, I fixed that, I fixed this, I fixed that, now I'm succeeding. So it's really more about that information and feedback loop. But if you can't tell yourself why you think you failed, if you don't have a point of view, right or wrong, you're probably doomed to repeat that failure again.
That's amazing. I want to go back to your total addressable market comment, because most businesses don't have, I'm going to use the word luxury, to have everybody in the world be their customer. And every marketing guru in the world will tell you, especially as a new business owner, whatever you do, don't go after everybody.
Right.
But you're in a unique position where your products kind of serve that mission. How do you focus with a customer base so vast that you could sell to anybody? You still have to have focus and pick and choose. What do those conversations look like around focus?
I think about it on an axis of, you've got fit, like how good of a fit is this company for what you're selling, and then intent. How in the market are they? And when you've got high fit, like this is a great fit for what I sell, and they've got high intent, they're super interested in what I do, that's kind of your magic quadrant. That's where you're going to make money. And then if you've got low fit, low intent, you're going to spend a lot of time, resources, and energy there, and that's going to have a low outcome. And then operating on that axis to find where it is where you want to go operate and where you're making money and getting a return for your time, energy, and expense. That's generally how I think about just about everything, fit and intent. Whether you're, again, selling pallets, house cleaning, house plants for an office, whatever you're selling, who's a good fit for that? If you're selling pallets, somebody who sells furniture or who's selling bathroom furniture or fixtures, they're a great fit. Like somebody who's growing now, they're selling more and more stuff. They've got high intent, they need more pallets, I'm gonna go sell to them. Somebody who's selling shoes is probably not a good fit for a pallet. Somebody who's selling shoes and is not growing, certainly not a good fit for a pallet. That's how I think about it.
Gotcha. And then do you typically look at that, from an industry focus and say, typically this industry does really well for us, or are you really kind of taking it on a customer by customer basis and say, this industry, this customer is a good fit, but this customer in the same industry, maybe not a good fit?
For what I've done with Zoom and then what I did before, it was about basically we call them micro TAMs, so taking it down to a lower level. So you might have software as a TAM, and you might have delivery or logistics software as a micro TAM. And so the lower level and the more detailed that you can get to, the more likely you are to land in a place that is repeatable. So if I find out that software logistics companies are a better fit, then that's what I'm gonna go look for. If I just say software companies, in some cases I'll get to logistics, but it might be by happen chance. So the lower level of detail that you can get to, the better you can predict your outcome. If you're as blessed or as fortunate or the luxury of us, even if you miss, you still might hit something. So depending on how broad your market is, will also dictate how narrow you need to be there. And then on the intent side, that is a company by company view. Like how in the market are you? That's company by company, but the micro TAM or the TAMs are kind of in a larger view. That's how we've done it.
One of our speakers, Ricky Wright, she said something very interesting that I never thought of. She said that pivoting when you're a bigger company is a little bit harder than it is when you're a smaller business. Do you agree with that? And if you do, how do you pivot?
I do think it's like a momentum. It's like if you're a small speedboat, turning around is easy. If you're a larger boat, turning around takes a little bit of time. You've got to, and the way to think about that is that you need to be able to see the iceberg sooner if you're a larger boat, because you're not going to be able to turn in time. If you're a speedboat, zoom, 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 I'm around it.
No pun intended.
No pun intended. And so it's interesting, as we got bigger, because when I first started, or when I started the other company that I own, like speed was the most valued asset. How quickly can we move? How quickly can we pivot?
Right.
And we still move for our size. I think we're 3,700 employees now. For our size, we still have that DNA. But what I had to learn, and this is a learning, I'm 52, I'm still learning. What I had to learn is that we got bigger, then speed is not always worth the cost of being wrong. So sometimes being a little bit more thoughtful about it and making sure that you're not going to hit that iceberg is more important, because the cost of hitting that iceberg as you get bigger, it's a greater cost. So you kind of have to gauge that. So small, speed is really important, but as you get a little bit bigger or more successful, then you need to be a little bit more thoughtful, and maybe speed's not the only gear.
Are there signs? What's a sign that, we're getting a little bit bigger, it's going to take a little bit longer to pivot?
I think the question that I ask myself about every decision that I make is, what if I'm wrong? So I'm going to go this marketing campaign, I'm going to go hire this salesperson, I'm going to open this store. What if I'm wrong? What if that's not the right spot to open? What if that person's not the right person to hire? What is it going to cost me? And am I going to be able to recover from it? So I think asking those questions, what if I'm wrong? And if the what if I'm wrong is like, oh shit, I'm done, then it's probably not worth it.
Awesome.
Am I allowed to swear on this? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Shit, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Chris, you're shocking our bookish sensibilities. Come on.
Sorry.
No way. I don't know. Where's Lindsay? Is Lindsay still here? Are you allowed to curse? I think she stepped out of the room.
But I mean, every business has a little bit of a different idea about what is that kind of, we call them Ripcord moments. The investments and the chances we've taken with ZoomInfo, like if we're going to go invest and I'm going to go spend, $15 million here, at what point in time am I going to pull the ripcord? I'm not getting the return that I wanted to get, having that ripcord moment, and again, like those milestones, owning that and holding true to it is like, so I still make a mistake, but I've pulled the ripcord and I haven't gone over the chasm.
I see what you're saying. It's like more intentional with the pivoting, more intentional on
Yes.
on how to pivot, rather than with a business, smaller business like we have. It might be a little bit easier without. I don't know, maybe.
I think it's easier if you're smaller, yeah.
Yeah.
You can be a little bit more nimble, I think.
Yeah.
But depending on the capital, it could also be harder too.
But we all have to have a ripcord.
Yeah, you have to have we've had ripcords and we did, I think, 6 acquisitions last year. We bought 6 companies. And so when you go do that, you've got an investment thesis. Is that going to be a good thing? How are we going to invest? How are we going to accelerate growth? And understanding if that's not working out the way that you thought it was going to work out, at what point in time do you pivot? When does that pivot happen? And again, defining that before you're going in, having that set up, at what point do I pivot? Knowing that before you start is way better than figuring it out when you go.
Yeah. So kind of take us back to co-founding an organization. So I think most of the small business owners here in the room can probably relate to that better than running a $16 billion company. So maybe talk about those early stages and, why did you get into business ownership? Why did you co-found that? And kind of what was a little bit about your experience there?
Sure. So I was with Lucent Technologies Avaya for most of my professional career. I started as a salesperson when I was, I think, in 28 or 29. And I had a successful career. And then Avaya got purchased by a company called Silver Lake TPG. They're a private equity company. And Avaya was publicly traded. Silver Lake TPG came in and took them private. This was like in 2007. And in that time, what that meant was they're going to extract expense from the company. It's not a pleasant experience. Being taken private now means a few different things than it meant then. Anyway, it was not a great environment. I had to let a lot of people go that I worked with, and we were sending people low-cost country was a thing then. And so I decided at that point in time I was going to leave, and I was successful. I was making a really good living, and I was on the up, and I decided I was going to leave. And I started a sales consulting company with my brother up in Buffalo, New York. At the time, it was called Be Relevant Group, and it was Steve and I in like a little small office in downtown Buffalo. We had like 3 clients. And right after I left, it was like the housing market, if you guys remember 2008, like it imploded. So it was like the worst possible time to have like left this durable growth, good paying job. And it was pretty scary, like to be out there in that environment where you're just giving up like a steady wage, and then like now everything that I have to earn, I'm earning on my own. But it worked out. It was good. So Steve and I started this company as a sales consulting company, and I think this is maybe a good life story for those of you guys who are starting out. Being a consultant is valuable, and it's like you can make good money at it, but it's also hard to get started. I was talking to the gentleman in the back who is running a consulting company, and you've got to be pretty good, and you've got to hold on to your clients. And Steve and I were humming along, and we were doing okay. And then we got this random call from a company called Regis Offices. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Regis. They were WeWork before WeWork was cool. They have all these offices all around. It was like you could rent offices by the month. We got this call from Bob Goudreau. He was in Hartford, Connecticut. He found us online. He called and said, look, I want to talk to you guys. And so Steve and I were in Buffalo, New York. Steve and I get in the car and we drive to Greenwich, Connecticut to go meet with Bob. And Bob is the SVP of North America sales. Really intimidating guy. We get there, and we're all ready to pitch Bob about how great Be Relevant is and all our sales consulting stuff, and let me tell you how this is going to work out for you guys. And Bob's like, and I'm not going to say the words that Bob said because they're offensive, but he said, all I really need is leads. So I need leads from you guys. That's what I need. And so Steve and I were like, okay, that's great. We can give you leads. We know how we're going to do it. But this is a good opportunity to get a meeting with Bob Goudreau and have him tell you he wants leads is a good opportunity. So Steve and I drive back to Buffalo, and we're talking about how we're going to go do this. And we start to put the plan together. And then Bob tells us, I'm only going to pay you like on outcome. I'm not going to give you any money. So I'll only pay you for the money that you make. We're like, why don't we do that give us 30 grand to get started, and then after we prove how successful we are, then we'll go on retainer and you can pay us an outcome. So Bob says, okay, I'm gonna put you guys in a bake-off with another company. Here's 30 grand. You guys gotta go figure this out. So now we hire a guy, we go out buying software and all this stuff, and we start running this play, and we're doing this and we're successful. We actually have a good outcome, and then over the course of the next 2 years, that engagement with Regis grew into be a $300,000 a month revenue stream for us. It was a pretty material thing. It was a game changer for us as a business. And the lesson for me was and is that when you have an opportunity, even it might not be the opportunity that you exactly wanted to go after. I want to be a sales consultant. I see an opportunity that's a little bit right or a little bit left. If it's a good one, I'm going to go after it. I don't have a lot to lose, and I have a lot to win. And it's not completely. It wasn't like Bob wanted us to sell shoes or anything. He wanted us to still do sales work. And that opened up an opportunity for us to do other sales consultancy, and it gave us credibility, and it also gave us a revenue stream. And that was a pretty big game changer. And I've taken a lot of the stuff that I learned from that engagement with Bob and Regis and with Steve, and that's part of the reason why ZoomInfo Discover.org grew so much, is because we figured out a way to grow a go-to-market like that. So
you grew this business, and then you got out of it?
I got out of it.
Okay,
yeah.
So
there's another life lesson there.
So one of our pillars that we talk about in our membership is exit strategy. So curious, two-part question, I guess. Was there a sign that you were ready to leave, and what was that process like?
I still have part of the business, so I haven't fully exited. But the other life lesson: who in here is in business with a family member? Anybody?
Does your wife count?
Does your wife count? Wife counts. So the other life lesson here is that even if you're in business with a family member, make sure you have a contract. So that's the other life lesson here. So, because what ends up happening, and I'm half kidding here, but I'm really not. What ends up happening is you have a successful business, and you're in a partnership with somebody, whether it's your brother, your wife's different probably, whether it's your brother, your cousin, or somebody that you went to school with, having an agreed upon understanding about who owns what and what's the disbursement of things, who's going to make money, having that stuff figured out will save you a lot of pain and suffering of figuring it out when you're successful. So having some of that laid out, it might seem like Steve and I were in a room in Buffalo. I was making at that time, I think I was drawing a salary of $45,000 a year. It was the idea that we were going to make millions of dollars just seems like so far away. But then when you end up making millions of dollars, if you don't have that playbook about how you're going to do it, it causes problems. So plan for success, I think, is probably the takeaway there.
Did you see Michael Jonas's ears perk up when he said have a contract? See that? He's like, yes, yes.
Yeah, plan for success.
One of your real areas of expertise, and you've talked a little bit about it, is scaling and scaling businesses. It can be really hard to scale a business when you're first starting out, particularly early stage. How do you attract the right customers? How do you attract customers that are going to make a difference? What tips would you have for early stage business owners on trying to get from like proof of concept stage into really growth and scale mode?
I think a lot of it has to do with like a fixed process. So you'll hear a lot about people talk about a founder-led business. So Henry's amazing. Like Henry could sell ZoomInfo Discover work to anyone. Like he's just an amazing person. But can somebody else who's not the founder CEO, can he or she do that as well as Henry? No, they can't is the answer. But you can build a process and a system around allowing them to be able to do that. So when you're doing that and you're the salesperson for your own company, understanding what makes you successful and how you can articulate that to people that you're going to bring in so that they can repeat, maybe not to the same level that you're doing it, but if they can repeat that process and you can scale that, that's the first step. And then once you've got 1, 2, or 3 people doing that, the next step is to now bring in a manager or a leader over that person who can then scale another team. Because part of the way we all make money in business is we hire people, we pay them, and then we make money from what they're doing for us. So being able to make those people successful is the key for us being successful. And you have to have that process and structure built out. Otherwise, you're just hiring people and hoping they're going to figure out you're wasting money. So I guess the short answer, or maybe it's not short, is the long answer is just the process and understanding what makes you successful as a business leader and how can you translate that back to the people that you're hiring.
Yeah, and we see that so much from small business owners. They're scared really to make that first hire. Like that is one of the most daunting decisions, I think, for small business owners to make that first hire. And we've heard from people who have been there, like yourself, to say, hire before you think you're ready. Would you agree with that? Is hiring one of those like key things that that'll really launch you into kind of growth mode as long as you're hiring for the right things and the right person?
I think the way I think about it is if you are seeing some success, so if I can go out and talk to you and I can get you interested in my product or service and I have a viable offering, if I know that I've got proof of life, I call it, then at that point in time I would hire somebody to see how quickly I can scale it. And then also with anything, don't be afraid to admit or acknowledge that maybe the person that you hired was not the right hire. We make mistakes hiring. It's a learning event. You try not to make a mistake, but if you do make a mistake, if you bring somebody in who you don't like working with, or they don't have the same, work habits or whatever reason, acknowledge that and move on. And again, don't make the same mistake twice if you can. But I wouldn't go out, if I were starting a business today, I wouldn't go out and run out and hire 10 people. I would go out, figure out my business model, figure out what my offering is, go out and test it with myself as a salesperson, see if I have proof of life. Are they willing to pay for it? Is it viable? And once I've got proof of life and viability, then I'm going to go out and hire, like hopefully a mini me, to go out and do that for me, and then rinse and repeat. That's how I would do it.
And that's where the speed comes in. At that point, then,
Yes.
being quick about those decisions to try to get into that growth mode.
If you've got a tiger by the tail, like if you're really like doing really well, then you want to go and you want to lean into that for sure. And sometimes you get lucky, you get a tiger by the tail and you just want to lead in. And then understanding if it's cyclical, like a lot of people got a tailwind. But we all thought COVID was going to be a headwind, right? But a lot of people got a tailwind from COVID. Mm-hmm. And so leaning in then, and then understanding, did those winds shift? Is this now the new economy that we're in, or are we now in a little bit more of a headwind? So pulling back from that and not investing into that, kind of just feeling that out.
Yeah. I find it really interesting that you are the president and chief operating officer, and I've had a lot of corporate jobs in sales and customer service, frontline, customer facing, revenue generating, and without fail, at every place that I've worked, there is always sort of this tension between sales and operations. And on our questionnaire that you filled out for us, under the question profession, you wrote sales.
Yes.
Just sales. And, in addition to ZoomInfo, in his storied career,
awesome.
Chris has sold ZoomInfo. He's been a sales consultant, also sold termite services and pagers.
Awesome.
Which, even though I'm making light of it, my guess is that generated a hell of a lot of sales shops for you.
Yeah.
But talk to me about being the chief operating officer and being a salesperson. What does that say about the sales culture at ZoomInfo, and how do you guys sort of manage that natural tension that often comes between operations and sales?
It's a good question. I think, one of the trick questions you'll ask in a room with people, and you'll go, raise your hand if you're a salesperson. And, the answer is, if you're a business owner, everybody's a salesperson. Everybody is selling. Sales, my father sold copiers when I was, my dad sold copiers. Admirable business. It's a lot more commoditized now, but that's kind of it's a hard sales job. So sales tends to have maybe a little bit of a negative connotation from those days, like Death of a Salesman, Willie Loman, and whatnot. But we're all sales is what makes our company successful. So whether you're a customer service rep, whether you're a revenue operations person, whether you're at the cash register of the city sandwich down the road, you're selling the company. That's what they see. That's what they're getting. The smile or the lack thereof. We're always selling. And that's something that Henry, to his credit, ZoomInfo has always been a sales-first culture, customer-first culture. And I think as we've gotten bigger, we've managed to maintain that. And we ask that question, like I said, raise your hand if you're in sales. And then we laugh at the people who don't raise their hands, because everybody's in sales.
Yeah.
But you're right, in some companies that don't have that, there is a tension between sales and operations. You also hear tensions between sales and marketing as well. The lady from Comcast talked about that. It's a real thing in other companies as well.
Yeah, for sure.
What's the hardest thing you had to sell?
Termite inspections was a bear. Have you guys ever seen a termite swarm?
No. Well,
So subterranean termites, once a year when it gets hot, they tunnel up to your house. It's crazy that I know this stuff, so. They tunnel up to your house and it gets warm and then they swarm out and they swarm and it's like terrifying if you see it, to leave all these wings around. And so you'd have to go to these people's houses and they'd be like, they think the world's ending because like this massive things flew out of their kitchen. Yeah, that was pretty hard. That was pretty hard. And then you have to go in, at the time you had to drill around all of their property to drill stuff into the ground to stop them from coming. That was hard.
whoa.
That was
so you
hard.
actually had to like.
Yeah, I didn't do the drilling. I was a sales guy. That was somebody else. I was the sales guy.
You had to go send the driller into,
I just sent the driller,
into the
yeah.
house. So your business is incredible, and it almost seems like you've built a relatively recession-proof business because you have this incredible total addressable market. But your customers, I'm sure, are not in the same boat. What are you seeing in the marketplace? What are you hearing from your customers? What's the overall kind of feeling about, the current market, the current conditions? Because it is kind of a weird time on the tail end of COVID and sort of the doom and gloom of maybe what's coming next year. What are you seeing out in the marketplace?
It's a good question. I think, COVID was something that nobody had ever seen before, right? Nobody's lived through a pandemic. I think the last one was it was Spanish flu, so 1919. So we didn't know what to expect. So the very beginning of COVID, when we all went home, when they stopped, I think it was sometime like March 14th or March 18th, kind of when nobody was going to the offices anymore, there was a lot of uncertainty. And when there's uncertainty in the beginning, people tend to freeze. Like, what am I gonna do? Am I gonna go left or right? I'm not gonna do anything. I'm just gonna stand right here and hope I don't get hurt. And then, but capitalism is a strong pull. And so we're all in the business of making money to care for our family, to care for ourselves. That is basically what drives capitalism. So capitalism hates inertia. So at some point in COVID, people had to go, I'm gonna go left, I'm gonna go right. I can't just stand there, I've gotta go do something. And once people figured out that this is the new norm, like we're gonna be on Zoom calls all day and the world's not gonna end. I'm gonna wear pajamas for all day, the world's not gonna end. Once people figured that out, then they were able to operate. And with the onset of whether it's a recession or an economic downturn, similar things happen. People are unsure of what's gonna happen. And so they tend to freeze and they wait. And then they wait to figure out, what's this gonna look like? What's the new norm gonna be? Is the interest rates gonna be 5 points? Is it gonna be 4 points? Are they gonna raise 2 more times? But once they get to a point where they know what's gonna happen, then they're operating. There's no inertia, they're operating. They might not be spending as much, they might not be doing as much, but they're doing some things. So what that looks like then is you run into a period of time where things contract a little bit, things get slower, and then you figure out which way it's going, left or right. And if you're lucky enough to be in a position where you can capitalize on it, you go right or you go left. But just understanding where people are gonna go. And in a recession, what people are gonna wanna do is they're gonna wanna do things more efficiently. When things are growing, we're all leaning in. Spend money, go grow. When things are slowing down, we need to be more conscientious about our spend, and it needs to be, I'm only gonna go do these 2 things, and I need those two bets to pay off. I'm not gonna do 5 things. So figuring out what those things are gonna be and then leaning into them is, I think, the key to weathering a recession. And understanding as a business owner that if you have been running a business for the past 5 years and you've been growing, maybe right now it's a time to say, I'm not gonna open that other store. I'm not gonna hire that other person. I'm gonna wait another couple of weeks and see what happens. Or I'm gonna go do that. I'm still seeing progress. I'm still things moving forward. I'm gonna go make that play. But you just need to be more thoughtful about it. And I said to these 2 gentlemen, I said, it's about doing less better in a recession. That's how I think about it.
Yeah.
Totally well put.
So I want to go back. I meant to ask this as a follow-up when we were talking about scaling, because you had shared a story with us the last time we talked about one of the kind of tricks and techniques that Henry had used when he was just starting out, and I'd like for you to retell that story, because it was kind of funny, but at the same time it really made us think about, well, how do we start to acquire customers that make a difference in an early stage kind of situation?
It's a good story. I don't know if you know it or not. Like Henry started the company, like it's a market cap of 15 billion or so. Henry started it was two guys. They started it, Kirk and Henry. So it was a small business at one point in time. And when you're a small business, I've been there when I was with Steve at Be Relevant. We tried to look bigger than we were. You want to look bigger, and you want to throw a bigger persona out in the market. So one of the things that Henry would do is we would build personas that didn't exist. So we would say, I'm Henry Schuck, I'm Chris Hayes, and then we would make up people. This is Rob Smythe, this is Sue Killian. Like we would make up names and market and send emails out for these folks. And it gave you the perception of being bigger. And then, Henry sold, like one of his first larger transactions, I'm not going to say the name of the company, but it was a company, if I said it, you would know it. He had success by marketing from Rob Smythe, a made-up person, to this company, and they wanted him to fly out and meet and sign the agreement. And so Henry got to fly out, and he had talked to them on the phone as Rob Smythe.
That's awesome.
And he flies out to close the deal, but Rob's unfortunately sick, and Rob can't make it. And as they're having dinner, the lady's like, you sound a lot like Rob. No, Rob's sick at home. But those are things that, and this is several years ago, those are things that you would do as a small business to give a perception of a larger company. The advantage that we have now for a small business is it's really not that difficult to look bigger. Like the democratization of websites, technology, software like as a service where you can just spend like small amounts of money every month on things. Being able to look big as a small company has never been easier. One pro tip for you as well, I think it's a good tip. If you've got email addresses and you're using first name at company name, add first name dot last name. It makes you look bigger. If you've got John at ZoomInfo.com, you look smaller. If you've got John.Smith at ZoomInfo.com, it looks bigger. Pro tip.
I'll be Art. I'm Art.Vandalay.
Art.Vandalay.
Well, Chris, this is amazing. We've got a great audience here who's been with us all day. We could sit here and talk to you all day long, but we're actually going to leave it there for now. But before we go, Ben, it's time.
Already? It's time?
It's time.
So, Chris, we used to do what was called the final question. But now we're doing the final action. One thing that everybody here in front of us and listening on the podcast can do immediately to help their business, whether it's for the recession or whatever. What's one thing they can do right now?
It's a great question. I would set a milestone about what you want to achieve in the next 3 months and then put together the plan to go drive that. That's what I would do. Is that okay?
It's your action. It's your action.
Again, like we're in an interesting time right now. So like whether you're growing or whether you're pulling back, set a milestone about what you think you want to accomplish between now and the end of the year, and then measure that, and then make a decision about 2023 from that. That would be my advice.
Yeah, I mean, we heard that earlier, right, with Carl talking about strategic planning and taking, making them shorter sprints versus taking such a big long view. You want to have the long view, but you want to have those shorter sprints in the middle of those.
100%. You need to have a overarching strategy that you can operate in, but in a pullback like this, you're looking at wind sprints. You're not looking at marathons right now. It's wind sprints. 100%.
That's awesome. Well, you've really kind of backed up a lot of the themes and a lot of the things that we've talked about, for the whole day. We really appreciate you taking time,
it's been a pleasure.
Flying in to see us and spending time. If people want to find out more about you and about ZoomInfo, where would you like people to go?
ZoomInfo.com, or we're right over there on Broadway. So that way, yeah. Sorry, right there, I can see it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
The Business Over Beer podcast is brought to you by Passages to Success, a local mastermind group focused on helping small business owners be better business owners. For more information, visit passagestosuccess.com. The Passages to Success Fall Conference is presented by Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Special thanks to all our sponsors: the Port of Vancouver, Gravitate, Greenhaven Landscapes, Rational Unicorn, Inlight Hyperbarics, Twin Star Credit Union, Chase, Victor 23 Craft Brewery, Vallow Cellars, Heathen Brewing, Your Water Lady, and the barbers. This is Jason Knope, the gangsta of Hazeldale, reminding you to always drink responsibly. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Business Over Beer.
TH